Alrighty. So before going any further, I figured it'd be a good idea for me to give you guys a bit of a rundown on the gear that I use. And starting with guitars, I use a Fender Telecaster and I use a Gibson Les Paul Studio. So starting with the Studio, this is the first proper electric guitar that I ever bought, never owned. I was a very big Slash fan when I was younger. And I've had this guitar for about 10 to 11 years now, maybe. It's a 2010 era Les Paul Studio in a Fireburst finish. And what I realized before making this video is that unfortunately that's the only thing that I actually know about this guitar. So everything else that I'm about to say I had to look up before recording this. So the body is a chambered mahogany body with a maple top. It's got a stop bar tailpiece and tune-o-matic bridge. The pickups are Gibson 490R and 498T humbuckers in the neck and bridge respectively. The neck is a 50s profile mahogany neck with a rosewood fingerboard, and the tuners are Gibson Deluxe. Oh, and I also lost the knob that comes with the pickup selector a number of years ago. I think I snapped it off when I was playing with it. And I have been trying to find a replacement ever since. And for some reason, every replacement that I buy doesn't seem to fit properly. And the guitar's not a fake or anything. I bought it from an authorized Gibson dealer. Same with the replacement knobs that I've bought. For whatever reason, none of them ever fit. So if any of you guys have any information on why that might be, if you can let me know, I'd really appreciate it, because I'd love to get it replaced. I just haven't been able to kind of figure it out, really. And moving on to my second guitar, which is my main guitar right now, this is a American Originals 60s spec Fender Telecaster. So the Tele is made from alder. It has double binding on the back and on the front, as you can see. It's got a classic 3-saddle bridge, 64 pure vintage pickups in the neck and bridge as well. The neck is a 60s spec C shape, which is actually part of the reason that I bought it, because coming from the Gibson with the fatted, more sort of rounded neck, it was a lot more comfortable than the other models of Teles that I bought. And then the more that I sort of looked into it, the more that I realized that this was basically the right guitar for me. The fingerboard is made from rosewood, and the tuners are pure Clouson style vintage tuners. Now, as soon as I picked up this guitar, I instantly fell in love with it. At the time that I was looking at buying it, I was moving away from the sort of muddiness of the humbuckers that I have on my Gibson, because I was looking for something with a little bit more of kind of a rattle and a twang to the tone, and everything about this guitar just works for me. This actually opened doors for me with my playing, whereas with the Gibson I would never go anywhere near the neck pickup or the middle position, because to me it just sounded too muddy. I wanted something with a bit more clarity, so I'd leave the Gibson set on the bridge pickup and then just bang away at it. But in getting this, I found that with all of the tones that I get out of it, I loved every single one of them, and in using the neck pickup and the middle position, I found that I actually began to play with a bit more expression, instead of just kind of leaving it on one setting and like smacking it as hard as I could, as great as it is. And for the rest of my guitars, which you can see over my shoulder, I've got a simple classic nylon string guitar. I have a 12-string Yamaha, which I have strung at the moment as a 6-string, and I have a Epiphone Firebird bass, which I'm borrowing from one of my bandmates, just for filling out backing tracks and loops and stuff. Now onto amplifiers. I have 2 combo amps that I use. And before I get into the specs and logistics with everything involving them, I'm going to try recording them live. I'm going to try miking them up. But the thing is that I've never done that before. So this is going to be a bit of an experimentation for the both of us. Just bear with me on this one. I'll also do a video in future on sort of tips and tricks for kind of miking up your own amplifier and making it sound good, if it goes well. So my first amp is a Marshall Class 5. It's a 5 watt all valve Class A amplifier, and it's rugged and it's simple and it's great. It just has 4 knobs. It's got volume, high, mid and lows. You crank the volume and it breaks up. For the EQ, I keep the highs and the lows almost maxed out, and then I adjust the mids depending on the tone that I want, because I found that this is the easiest and the most consistent way in finding a good sound and getting a good sound out of the amplifier. It also has a low power switch on the back, which is great because it means that you can basically crank it, turn it all the way up, and you're not going to blow any windows out, but you'll get a really good sort of classic kind of Marshall sound out of it. And with this one, I tend not to really use that many pedals going into it. This is more of just kind of a fun, grab the Gibson, crank it, and away we go. So my second amp is a Fender Hot Rod Deluxe, the most recent version, the 4 version. And this is a 40 watt combo amp, all valve, with 3 channels. It's got clean, drive, and more drive. But I use it primarily just on clean because it's got an amazing headroom and it's perfect for running pedals into it, which is the exact thing that I use it for. So for the volume, I have it set to 1.52. because as a 40 watt amplifier, when you crank this thing, it really has some power to it. For the EQ, I have the EQ set mostly to noon across all the different spectrums, with a bit of a scoop to the mids, because in the space that I'm in, I found that if the mids are a bit too high, the signal gets a little bit muddy, a little bit dirty, and loses kind of the upper clarity of it. And I have the presence set to around 5 or 6, just to kind of lift that clarity as well. And then just a touch of spring reverb around 2 or 3, just to add a little bit of sort of breath and life to the signal. And I'll play into this one clean, I'll play into it just straight, so you can hear the bass tone that I'm sort of playing and putting my pedals on top of. Now, pedals. And for my pedal boards, I have a A-rig and I have a B-rig. And the A-rig is my sort of stay-at-home experimentation, bigger unit that doesn't really go anywhere. Whereas my B-rig is my kind of grab-and-go gigging rehearsal board. And the way that I approach my pedal board building comes a lot from what I need with my band with the gigging that we do. So we move between a number of different bars and venues, and we don't take any of our own amps with us. We rely on the amplifiers that they have at the different places we're in. And what this means is that they have a very different setup. So in order to make sure that my tone is consistent across all the different performances that we're doing, the first most imperative part of my board is a preamp pedal, or at least something that functions as a preamp pedal. Just an always-on pedal that will sound consistent and good no matter what I plug it into. And then from there, I build the rest of the board around it. So this is my A-rig. This is my big stay-at-home kind of experimentation, writing, flagship of tone, if you will. So I'm using a Pedal Train Classic Junior for the bass, and the power is coming from a MXR ISO brick. So the way I've got this set up is I'm going into a volume pedal to begin with, a Dunlop mini volume pedal, with the Polytune 3 on the tuner output. For my gain stage, I've got the Way Huge Conspiracy Theory overdrive going into a Benson Preamp, and then the JHS Haunting Mids for my EQ pedal. Now, I've got the Benson set just to the edge of breakup, So with the conspiracy theory, the gain isn't too high. I just need the volume boost with a little bit of gain to kind of fatten up the tone and add a bit of sustain if I'm going for like a bit more of an overdriven part or like a lead or something. And then for the JHS, I've just got it set to a bit of a volume boost, a bit of a mid boost, just so it cuts through the mix for any lead lines or solos or anything like that. Now for the modulation section, I have the Way Huge Blue Hippo vibrato chorus, which I use mostly for chordal stuff, just adding another layer to kind of background rhythm patterns. For delay, I have the Danelectro Backtalk, bit of reverse delay, which I use on more kind of atmospheric tones. For all other delay, I have the Arp-87. And then finally for reverb, I have the Walrus Fathom, which I just use primarily for big, cavernous kind of sound. So when all you really want to do is just sort of lose yourself in some huge, esoteric, existential jam kind of thing. Now for my B rig, which is my grab and go rehearsal gigging sort of rig, I've just kept it very simple, very light. I'm using a pedal train Metro 16 and the power is coming from an MXR mini ISO brick. So for the gain stage on this one, I have the 1981 drive going into a JHS Morning Glory, which is working kind of as a preamp pedal with that sort of blues breaker, edge of breakup kind of sound to it. Then I've got a very basic chorus, the Behringer chorus, and then the Aqua Puss delay set to a very subtle, very unobtrusive kind of slapback tone, just to add a bit of sort of reverb and kind of presence to the tone. And for a boost, I use the JHS Red Remote to kick the Morning Glory into its second drive stage, which tightens up the signal, fattens it up a bit, adds a little bit more drive, and then adds enough of a volume boost that it manages to cut through the mix in a live situation. And for all things recording and kind of capturing sound, I'm just using a simple Focusrite 4i4 interface running into Logic, and then any of the amp modeling that I do comes from the Neural DSP Soldano pack. So if I'm recording with any of my pedals, I just run it straight into the front of the clean setting and yeah, go from there. But I think that's it. So naturally, obviously, things are going to change over time as I get new gear and swap things out, you know, new amps, new pedals and everything. But for now, that's where things are. And yeah, hopefully that has kind of given you guys a bit of an insight into where I am now in terms of equipment and tone. So, yeah.